And we saw a lot of people online trying to dunk on this process by signing up their dogs, signing up their kids, signing up under a false name.
Carney's making some moves. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we got Danielle Smith blasting Mark Carney. We've also got the Freedom Convoy, and anyone involved is getting sued for $292 million. Got some interesting movement in the polls and some other stuff here. Let's jump into this. So first up, we got Polymarket here. So this is the next Prime Minister of Canada after election. So looking at this yesterday, it was 50-50, which is what we see here. But now there's a bump of Poilievre jumping up 5% to 55 and Carney going down. So very interesting. This happening after he axed the carbon tax, which he didn't actually do. He just wrote a piece of paper and signed it and put on a big drama performance. As we see here with Brian Lilly posting this, like I said, Mark Carney took a page out of Trump's book on his very first day, bringing the cameras in to watch his sign away the carbon tax. But if we take a look at the actual piece of paper he signed, this one posted by Ryan Williams here, it says, "I hereby instruct no references to legislation, no references to any act of any kind. This is not a legal document. It is just designed to make Carney look like Donald Trump. I hereby instruct that the fuel charge be removed by April 1st, 2025, and that the April 2025 Canada carbon rebate be issued." This is nothing. This is literally a paper of nothing. So jumping back to some polling data here, we're over at Polywave. So right now it's got the Liberals set ahead based on a couple of those last polls. Is that polling data good or not? We don't know. But if we look at the map here, so Mark Carney hasn't jumped out and called an election right away. And there's a few options here. So one, he calls an election right away. Two, he waits until October because he has Jagmeet support to do so. But he's not going to be able to sit in the House. He's going to have to sit in the gallery, and that would look ridiculous. So the Liberals can wait. There's a by-election in Halifax coming just in a month. So they can either use this Halifax by-election, which is this one here. They can use this as a litmus test to test out, would they win an election? This is more of a Liberal riding, so they for sure should win this. So if the Conservatives get anything more than 13%, they know, uh-oh, if we call election now, we're going to get decimated. The other thing they could do, seeing how this is 46% Liberals, Carney could ride in this, get a seat in the House, and then he can unroll his net zero agenda here all the way until October with Jagmeet support. And even if he gets a minority government, he could sign another dirty deal with Jagmeet. Now, Jagmeet would have to run in a different riding, maybe steal Matthew Green's riding in Halifax to do so, because he's going to lose his own riding. But regardless, there could be another minority government with another supply management agreement with the NDP. Who knows? So there's a lot of moving parts here. But there's options there with that Halifax by-election. If we take a look at the country as a whole, though, it's mostly blue. It's just, our corrupt system here where a few ridings hold way too much power, and thus the amount of seats doesn't dictate the popular vote. So jumping ahead here, we got Danielle Smith. She's coming out absolutely blasting Mark Carney and Doug Ford.
The Prime Minister has made his views very clear about keeping oil and gas in the ground. He's made his views very clear about he not wanting a transparent carbon tax. He wants a hidden one. So I don't think it does Alberta any good if we end up seeing massive increases to industrial carbon taxes. It's been quoted many times saying he thinks that the carbon tax is too low. So I'm going to just reserve judgment. I had a whole range of things that are problematic with the federal government, from emissions caps to tanker bans off the West Coast, the inability to approve pipelines, getting approvals and then having them pulled, having a convoluted regulatory process that makes it impossible to get new pipelines built, continued threats of regulating our power grid, continued threats of regulating our industry, continued threats of export taxes, cutting off energy. I haven't really seen any change that would lead me to be encouraged that we're going to have a reset on our relationship. So we need an election, and that's how it needs to get sorted out.
Wow, she's calling it out here straight. We do need an election, get rid of these corrupt Liberals. Election soon, late April or early May. Danielle Smith is always publicly in conflict with the federal government. Yeah, we'll see about this. They might delay this until October. Jagmeet's got their back. If Carney can get some wins under his belt, wins where he does something and then they can get footage of the guy, good marketing material, not just some guy who's never done anything. Because right now, if he goes to an election, there's literally no footage of him doing anything as a prime minister. It'd just be some, random banker shots. It's not a good look for a prime minister. It doesn't sell him as a leader. Where if he gets support from Jagmeet and actually does some stuff, put in some policies, and have Trudeau's marketing team follow him around like they did with Trudeau, it would give him a lot more campaign material. So it's hard to know what they're going to do here. And here's Danielle Smith blasting Doug Ford for threatening to cut off the electricity.
I would hope that the events of this week have made people realize how seriously the Americans take energy security. The president has signed an executive order declaring an energy emergency. So when it was threatened that electricity would be cut off, we saw an immediate increase of a tariff threat to 50% on steel and aluminum. And only after the premier backed down did those tariffs come in at 25%. I hope that is indicative to everyone. If that is how the reaction is going to be to $1 million worth of product going across the border, imagine what the reaction would be if for $350 million worth of product going across the border. Ontario only sells about $400 million a year in electricity. Alberta sells about $150 billion a year of oil and gas. So I would hope that if they haven't learned the lesson of the last week about how closely the Americans tie energy security to national security, I have every intention to make that perfectly clear in every meeting, in every forum. We will not support an export tax. We will not support any kind of curtailment on energy to the United States. We have other ways that we can take a measured and proportionate response, and that isn't it.
Yeah, she's calling out Doug Ford and really Susan Holt of New Brunswick as well. They're both guilty of this. Albertans could be richer than the Saudis, yet they are not. Trump is goading Quebec to bolt. The votes are now there. The nerve of Doug Ford, clearly Danielle, is way more Team Poilievre than Ford is. Ford is not Team Poilievre, really. He's a liberal. Next up, we got this proposed class action lawsuit against the Freedom Convoy organizers clears hurdle. This is disgusting. So we've got a proposed class action lawsuit against those who allegedly organized and funded the Freedom Convoy protest. Cleared another hurdle today on Thursday when the Ontario Court of Appeal refused to dismiss the case. So anyone who was a part of the Give, Send, Go All, any of the donations as well, apparently is getting wrapped up into this. So this started off as a $4.5 million lawsuit. And as it says here, some downtown Ottawa residents and businesses are suing now for $290 million, alleging personal suffering and business losses from the 2022 protest. How can they be enduring more losses than what Canadians have been going through for the last 9 years under Justin Trudeau? I'm sorry, but what? The lawsuit has not been certified as a class action. The defendants tried to get the case thrown out of court by arguing that their protest was in public interest, but the Court of Appeal upheld a lower court's ruling allowing the lawsuit to proceed. In court documents, the defendants say they plan to argue that they are following police direction when they park their trucks in Ottawa's downtown core. The Court of Appeal said it saw no evidence suggest that the police directed the truckers to remain parked on public streets for as long as they did, or to honk their horns with the frequency intensity they did. If they're going to be complaining about this, will they be suing the Palestinian protesters who are out there all the time banging their drums and blowing their horns? That's what I'd like to know, because if you just add up the cumulative time of how long Freedom Convoy truckers were sitting there honking their horns, there's no way it's even close to the amount of time that the banging of the drums and the blowing of the horns from Palestinian protesters have been doing over the past year. It's not even close. The motion judge understood the political motivation and goals of the convoy protest, and he understood the harm the residents and businesses in the protest zone contended they had suffered as a result of how the protest was conducted. Justice David Brown wrote on behalf of the 3-judge panel. Brown said he saw no error in how the lower court weighed the harm to the residents and the businesses against the public interest element of the protest. What's really disgusting about this and this double standard is, remember Justice Mosley ruled against Justin Trudeau, saying that there was no reason for him to invoke the Emergencies Act. It was against the Constitution. He had no right to do it because there was no threat. How can the Ontario court then go along with this? And as I mentioned, then you got to wrap in the Palestinian protesters, because they're in Ottawa all the time banging their drums. Our country's sliding down a slippery slope here. Like, it's getting dangerous how bad the corruption is in our country. Next up, we got a clip from CBC where David Cochrane is talking about Rebel News' question to Pierre Poilievre about the 400,000 Liberal signups, and yet there was only 150,000 votes, and how it seems very suspicious.
The other thing that's interesting there, Andrew, is the comments on the first question was from Rebel News, and it was about the low voter turnout in the, as they define it, in the Liberal leadership race. About 400,000 people signed up to be registered Liberals to vote in this. About 160,000 people, give or take, voted. There was some pruning down from that 400,000. Through the verification process that you're required to do, the 400,000 was just signing up to go through the verification process to be allowed out to vote. And we saw a lot of people online trying to dunk on this process by signing up their dogs, signing up their kids, signing up under a false name. Well, I don't know what the order of magnitude of that was, but a lot of those would have been vetted out. And then various other people, there were problems with the verification process, which stopped some people from voting. People may have signed up to vote for Ruby Dalla, who didn't go ahead after she got disqualified from the race. But that number was always going to come down. In the leadership race,
If people signed up for Ruby Dalla and then they didn't vote, what does that say? There's literally 250,000 votes that weren't cast. So even if you throw out all the dog votes and the kid votes, say that's whatever, 50,000 at most, we're still talking 200,000 votes. That just says a lot, whether it's Chandra Arya or Ruby Dalla. Would Mark Carney be struggling to actually win? Would Carney win it all, or would Ruby Dalla take it? Or Chandra Arya? They kicked them out because they were threats. They haven't shown any credible proof that they did anything wrong.
Race that Mr. Polyev won, about 200,000 people didn't vote. I think they had 600 and something thousand eligible to vote. About 400 and something did. It was about a 65% voter turnout. So it is not unusual to see the turnout in leadership races be lower than the maximum eligible number of people to vote.
David Cochrane doing his best here to try to help out the Liberals. More Liberal payoff propaganda. As I mentioned, $4 million a day the CBC gets. And what percentage is their political wing? They're probably spending $1 million a day to slander Pierre Poilievre and boost the Liberals. Our country is horribly corrupt. Only Rebel News bothered to look at the turnout for the Liberal race, but CBC had the CPC numbers handy. Of course they did. The mental gymnastics that David does for his future Senate seat is incredible. Raw numbers, raw numbers. Sounds shady to me. He definitely doesn't have a mandate like CBC would lead people to believe. With that, Pierre Poilievre coming out here with an ad against carbon tax Carney and his phony baloney cutting of the carbon tax.
Now, so far, carbon prices have been applied sparingly. They've been set far too low.
Everyone should try to have a price on carbon.
So in changing the carbon tax,
We need to use effectively a shadow carbon price.
Carbon price set far too low. The words right out of Mark Carney's mouth. The Prime Minister no one actually voted for. So we got news here. Doug Ford went down to meet with Howard Lutnick, and he's out here signing baseballs for some reason.
I will. Just give me 2 seconds.
This is bizarre. Why is he signing baseballs in America?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. We've had a very, very productive meeting, obviously a very long one too. We know that we're very close partners for many, many years. We want to make sure we continue building on that relationship. We feel that the temperature is being lowered. We feel the temperature is being lowered. And we've also agreed that we're going to have another meeting next week. And I think it's going to be very productive as well. We want the best outcome for both countries. We're like a family. And sometimes there's tension between families, but that was an extremely productive meeting.
Yeah, family doesn't turn off the electricity to someone's house, though.
And I just want to thank the secretary for the opportunity to go in there and stay this long and communicate. We shared a tremendous amount of views back and forth, and I'm feeling very positive.
He's feeling very positive. He got decimated in that negotiation. One thing's for certain, though, they have to negotiate with Doug Ford because he's got a fresh mandate. They know he's going to be there in the next 4 years. We got this clip here of Mark Carney directing Bill Blair to buy other fighter jets, not ones from America. So we've already committed to buy fighter jets, about $18 billion worth from America, and some of them are getting delivered next year. Carney wants to give the big middle finger to Donald Trump and switch the supplier.
Marina, let's talk about the new prime minister, his government, and how specifically they're moving on this contract to build U.S. warplanes.
Yeah, Canada is now actively looking for alternatives to the F-35s. These are stealth fighter jets. built and maintained in the United States by an American company, Lockheed Martin. The contract was signed in 2023 to purchase 88 of them. That would cost $19 billion. This is to replace the old CF-18s. But the federal government has been under pressure to cancel this contract in the wake of the threats that Donald Trump has been making about making Canada the 51st state, taking us over with economic force, and openly mocking the Canadian military as what he says is unable to defend itself. Defense Minister Bill Blair, speaking last night on Power and Politics, said that he has some new directives from the new Prime Minister. Have a listen.
The direction I've been given by the Prime Minister is go and look at all of our options to make sure that we make the right decision for Canada. We are also examining other alternatives, whether we need all of those fighter jets to be F-35s or if there might be alternatives.
Canada has already put down money on 16 of the planes, which are set to be delivered in about a year. But Blair was suggesting that the rest of those planes, well, maybe they could get them from somewhere else, and that potentially Canada could back out of the rest of the order of these jets, potentially purchasing them from a European manufacturer. Saab Gripen, which is a European company, had bid on that contract with Canada and offered to build and maintain them within Canada. So that could be a potential option.
He's getting his cut of a new contract at the expense of D&D. More dithering. I mean, really, they should be focusing on drones, not so much of those fighter jets. That's old style of combat. Alternatives. So Danielle Smith coming out today, strong message. This is what we need. We need Carney being pushed back right away. And I like to see it doesn't just come from Pierre Poilievre. It's coming from multiple different sources like Danielle Smith. Scott Moe the other day too, blasting Carney, saying, why are you going over to Europe when we've got a serious issue with China and those tariffs and the canola industry? Yet there's radio silence on that. I don't think Carney's going to touch that. He's not going to go anywhere near China because there's funding coming from China. We've already seen this with Justin Trudeau. That's flowing in from Carney. Carney had people from the CCP at his event. They're in deep with China. They're not going to rock the boat with their master Xi Jinping. Instead, Mark Carney's going over to meet with Macron in France. What is the point of that?